Imagine someone hands you the keys. The Amityville horror. Imagine someone hands you the keys to a beautiful waterfront mansion. 6 bedrooms, a private boathouse, a quiet neighborhood on Long Island, New York. The kind of home most families dream about. Then the realtor tells you one more thing. Just 13 months ago, 6 people were murdered inside. Every one of them was found lying in bed. None of them appeared to fight back. None of them escaped. Would you still move in? George and Kathy Lutz said yes. 28 days later, they abandoned everything they owned and ran. Whether they were fleeing ghosts or simply the weight of fear is a question people still argue about today. This is the true story behind the Amityville horror. The story begins on November 13th, 1974. The village of Amityville was still asleep. It was cold, dark, completely ordinary, until a young man named Ronald DeFeo Jr. burst into Henry's bar. His face was white, his hands trembled. He looked terrified. He shouted at everyone inside, "You have to help me. I think my mother and father have been shot." Several customers immediately followed him. They drove only a few minutes before arriving at 112 Ocean Avenue. From the outside, the house looked peaceful. Nothing seemed out of place. No broken windows, no smashed doors, no sign that anything violent had happened. But the moment they stepped inside, they realized something was terribly wrong. The house was silent. Not the peaceful silence of an empty home. A heavy, unnatural silence. One man walked upstairs. Seconds later, he screamed. Police arrived within minutes. What they found would become one of the most infamous crime scenes in American history. Ronald DeFeo Sr. lay face down in his bed. His wife, Louise, was beside him. Both had been shot. Upstairs, their 4 children were discovered in separate bedrooms. Dawn, Allison, Mark, John Matthew, every one of them, dead. 6 members of the same family, killed during the night. The murder weapon was a Marlin .35 caliber lever-action rifle. It wasn't a quiet weapon. Each shot should have echoed through the entire neighborhood. Yet almost nobody reported hearing multiple gunshots. That wasn't the only mystery. Every victim was found lying face down, still in bed. There were no signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no desperate attempt to escape. It looked as if no one had even tried to run. Investigators couldn't explain it. How could one person move through the house, firing such a loud rifle, without waking the others? The questions only multiplied. At first, Ronald claimed that a mafia hitman had broken into the house. He even gave detectives a name, but his story quickly fell apart. The evidence didn't match. His timeline kept changing. His explanations became increasingly inconsistent. After hours of interrogation, he finally confessed. Yes, he had killed them, one by one. When detectives asked him why, his answer chilled the room. "The voices told me to do it." Those 5 words would follow the case forever. Some believed Ronald was suffering from severe mental illness. Others believed he was inventing a story to avoid responsibility. Years later, he would change his explanation several times. But one fact never changed. He admitted pulling the trigger. In court, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was convicted of 6 counts of second-degree murder. He received 6 sentences of 25 years to life. For the police, the case was closed. A son had murdered his family. The killer had been caught. Justice had been served. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue stood empty. Its curved attic windows overlooked the water. Its lawn remained neatly trimmed. Its walls had witnessed unimaginable violence. Potential buyers visited. Most never returned. Word spread quickly. This was the house where an entire family had been murdered. Months passed. Eventually, the asking price dropped dramatically, far below the market value for a property like this. To many people, it looked like the bargain of a lifetime. One young couple thought exactly that. George and Kathy Lutz. They knew the history. The realtor made sure of it. Nothing was hidden. Friends warned them. Family members questioned their decision. But George believed the past was the past. A murderer had been arrested. Whatever happened inside those walls was over. Or so he thought, just before Christmas. The Lutz family carried their furniture through the front door. They laughed. The children explored their new bedrooms. The fireplace crackled. Boxes filled every room. It looked like the beginning of a happy new chapter. None of them realized they would celebrate only one Christmas in that house. And before January was over, they would leave in the middle of the night, convinced that something inside the house wanted them gone. Part 2. At first, life inside the house felt completely normal. The children ran from room to room, arguing over who would get the biggest bedroom. Kathy unpacked boxes. George spent his days repairing small things around the property. It almost felt like they had found the perfect home. But only a few days after moving in, small things began to change. They weren't dramatic, not at first, just strange enough to make the family uncomfortable. George noticed something almost immediately. No matter how much wood he threw into the fireplace, he couldn't stay warm. The fire burned for hours. The house felt comfortable. Everyone else wore light clothing, yet George shivered constantly. He wrapped himself in heavy sweaters. He sat beside the fireplace for hours. Still, he felt freezing cold. Then his sleeping habits changed. Every night, without fail, his eyes opened at exactly 3:15 a.m. Not 3:10, not 3:20, always 3:15. At first, he blamed stress. Moving into a new house could do that. But after several nights, he stopped believing it was coincidence. He would lie awake, staring into the darkness, listening. Sometimes, he thought he heard footsteps. Other nights, it sounded like someone walking downstairs, slow, heavy, deliberate. George would grab a flashlight, search every room, every hallway, every closet, nothing. The house was empty. At least, it appeared to be. Then strange smells began appearing. Without warning, one room would suddenly fill with the odor of something rotten. A smell so strong, it made everyone's stomach turn. Minutes later, it would disappear completely. No dead animal, no leaking pipe, no obvious source. The family searched everywhere. They never found an explanation. Then came the cold spots. Entire sections of the house felt icy. One doorway could feel perfectly normal. Take one step forward, and the temperature seemed to drop instantly. George checked the heating system. Nothing was wrong. Friends visited. Some noticed the same thing. Others didn't. That only made everything more confusing. Then something happened that George couldn't ignore. One afternoon, he locked the front door himself. He clearly remembered turning the key. Hours later, the door stood wide open. Nothing had been stolen. No one had entered. He blamed himself. Maybe he forgot. But it kept happening. Doors opened, windows unlocked themselves. Cabinets that had been closed were suddenly hanging open. The family tried to laugh about it. Old houses settle, wood expands, doors stick. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Then Missy, Kathy's youngest daughter, made a new friend. At least, that's what she called it. She told her parents about someone named Jody. At first, they weren't concerned. Imaginary friends are common, especially for young children. But the details became unsettling. Missy insisted Jody wasn't imaginary. She said Jody visited almost every day. Sometimes, Jody looked like a little girl. Other times, she became something else, a giant pig with glowing red eyes. George laughed the first time he heard it, until one night. He looked toward Missy's bedroom window and froze. Two bright red lights were staring back at him from outside. The bedroom was on the second floor. There was no balcony, no tree close enough to climb, no ladder. The glowing eyes remained motionless, watching. George grabbed a flashlight and rushed outside. By the time he reached the yard, they were gone. He searched the entire property. Nothing, no person, no animal, no footprints leading away. Only silence. He never told the children what he had seen. He didn't want to frighten them, but inside, he was beginning to question everything. As Christmas approached, George became increasingly withdrawn. He stopped smiling. He barely slept. He neglected work. Friends later said it was as if his personality had changed. He spent nearly every evening feeding the fireplace, hour after hour, watching the flames, almost hypnotized. Then the flies appeared, hundreds of them, swarming one upstairs room, covering the windows, buzzing loudly against the glass. It made no sense. Outside, the temperature was below freezing. Flies should not have survived. George killed them, opened the windows, cleared the room. The next day, they were back, just as many as before. One afternoon, Kathy was making the beds. She suddenly smelled perfume, a sweet, pleasant scent. It drifted through the hallway for only a few seconds. Then, without warning, the smell changed. Rotting garbage, decay, something so foul she had to cover her mouth. Seconds later, it disappeared, as if nothing had happened. The children also began waking during the night. They complained about strange noises, whispers, someone calling their names. George insisted it was only the old house settling, but he no longer believed his own words. The final straw came when Father Ralph, the priest who had blessed the home, called George. His voice sounded exhausted. He asked one question: Have you been having problems in the house? George paused, then answered quietly. Yes. The priest hesitated before speaking again. I tried calling several times. Every time I dialed, something interrupted the line. And George, there is one room, I don't want anyone sleeping in it. Before George could ask why, the phone suddenly filled